So you've probably heard the word agile thrown around, right? In meetings, job descriptions, it's become this huge buzzword. But what does it actually mean? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain and demystify agile, breaking down exactly how modern teams are using it to build some really amazing products. So let's get right into it.
Think about any project you've ever worked on. At its core, there's always this tension, right? On one hand, you've got the plan you made at the very beginning. On the other hand, things happen. The world changes. So what do? Do you stick to the plan no matter what, or do you stay flexible and adapt? For a very long time, the answer was simple. You follow the plan, period. And this old school approach, it was called the waterfall model. And you can think of it, well, literally like a waterfall. Once the water goes over the edge, there's no going back up. You would do all the planning, then all the design, then all the coding, and finally, at the very end, all the testing. It was a complete one-way street.
But here's the problem. In a fast-moving world, especially in tech, plans can be out of date before you're even done making them. So what happens when a competitor suddenly launches a new feature? Or, customer feedback reveals a huge flaw in your design? That's where this super rigid model really started to show its cracks. And this table really just lays out the problem perfectly. With Waterfall's linear approach, you might spend a whole year building something only to discover at the very end that it's not what the customer actually wanted. And testing happens last, which is so risky. I mean, it's like checking the foundation after you've already built the skyscraper. Agile just flips this whole thing on its head. It works in these flexible, iterative cycles, and it involves the customer constantly. It was a radical shift from a big reveal at the end to a continuous conversation. All this frustration with the old way just kept building and building until a group of forward thinkers decided, you know what, we don't need a new process. We need a whole new philosophy. And that's exactly what happened. Back in 2001, at a ski resort in Utah, of all places, 17 software developers got together, and they wrote what would become the Agile Manifesto. And this wasn't some 1,000-page rulebook. It was a simple declaration of values that would completely change their industry. And the entire Agile movement, this whole thing, it's built on just 4 simple but really powerful core values. They seem pretty straightforward, but they represent a massive shift in what we prioritize. All right, let's break down the first 2. The first one is about valuing individuals and interactions over rigid processes and tools. It's about letting smart people talk to each other to solve problems, not just forcing them to follow a script. The second one is all about prioritizing working software over comprehensive documentation. Look, the goal isn't to create a 100-page manual that no one's going to read. It's to build a product that actually works and helps people. And the final 2 values really bring it all home. Agile says we should value customer collaboration over just haggling over a contract. It turns the whole thing into a partnership where you work together to build the best thing possible. And that last one, that brings us right back to where we started, valuing responding to change over just blindly following a plan. That idea is the absolute heart of being agile. Okay, so we get the why behind agile, the big ideas. But what about the how? How do teams actually put these values into practice every day? Well, it all comes down to a cycle called the sprint. The sprint is really the heartbeat of Agile. It's not this endless marathon. Think of it more like a short, super focused burst of activity, usually lasting between 1 and 4 weeks. And the goal of every single sprint is to create a small, working, and valuable piece of the final product that you can actually show to people. So how does a sprint actually play out? Well, it all follows this same repeatable cycle. It all starts with the backlog. That's just a fancy word for the project's master to-do list. The team gets together for sprint planning and pulls a small chunk of work off that list. Then the real work begins. Designing, building, and testing all happen at the same time within that short sprint. At the end, the team presents what they've built in a sprint review, and finally, they hold what's called a retrospective, which is basically a meeting to ask, hey, what went well, what didn't, and how can we do even better next time? Then, you guessed it, the cycle starts all over again. And who are the key players in all this? There are 3 main roles. You've got the product owner, who is basically the voice of the customer. They decide what gets built. Then there's the Scrum Master, who's kind of like the team's coach, making sure everything runs smoothly and clearing any roadblocks. And of course, you have the development team, the experts who are actually building the thing. Agile sounds pretty great, right? But here's the thing. Like any methodology, it is not a magic bullet. It has some incredible strengths, but it also comes with some very real challenges.
The upsides are huge. Because you're working in these short cycles, teams are incredibly flexible. They can pivot on a dime. Customers get to see new features all the time, not just one big delivery at the end. Quality gets a major boost because testing is happening constantly. And maybe most importantly, risk is way, way lower. It's so much better to find out you're on the wrong track after 2 weeks than after 2 years. But here's the flip side. Agile really depends on having a highly skilled, motivated team that can communicate well. It's not exactly for beginners. And because the focus is so much on the working product, documentation can sometimes take a backseat. It's also really hard to give a precise final cost or delivery date up front, which makes things like fixed-price contracts a real headache. So that brings us to the big question. When should you actually use Agile? Because even though it's powerful, it is definitely not the right tool for every single job. So where does Agile really shine? It's perfect for situations where you know things are going to change, like a tech startup building a brand new app. It's awesome for innovative projects where you're figuring things out as you go. But if you're building, say, a bridge where the requirements are set in stone from day one, or you're in a heavily regulated industry that demands tons of upfront documentation, then a more traditional model is probably a much better fit. So at the end of the day, Agile isn't just a set of rules. It's a completely different mindset. It's about collaboration, about flexibility, and about delivering real value in a world that is always changing. It's about shifting from blindly following a map to using a compass to find your way. So I'll leave you with this to think about. What complex, changing problem in your world could you tackle with this approach?